I inherited a house that was basically falling apart. Broken windows, a roof that leaked every time it rained, walls that smelled like something had died inside them. Everyone told me to just sell it, tear it down, move on. But I didn't. And what I found hidden in the attic of that house, I still can't believe it's real. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is the story, because this isn't just about a house. It's about what happens when you stop running from the things that scare you and you actually go look. When my grandmother passed away 2 years ago, she left me everything she owned. Her savings, which were almost nothing, her old clothes, and a house in the countryside that nobody had lived in for over 15 years. I had never even been inside it, and when I finally walked through that front door for the first time, I almost walked right back out. The place was a disaster. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. The floor in the kitchen had completely caved in on one side. There were birds living inside the walls. I could hear them scratching around at night. The bathroom ceiling had collapsed at some point, and nobody had bothered to clean it up. There was just a pile of plaster and old tiles sitting on the floor, like a little mountain of everything wrong with this house. My first thought was money. How much would it cost to fix this? Could I even fix this? I called 2 different contractors, and both of them basically laughed at me. One of them said, and I'm quoting here, "This isn't a renovation, this is a demolition." He meant it as advice, like just knock the whole thing down and start fresh. The other one gave me a number so high I had to ask him to repeat it because I thought I'd heard wrong. I hadn't. So there I was, standing in the middle of this broken, rotting, bird-infested house that my grandmother had loved her whole life, and I had no money to fix it, no idea what to do with it, and everyone around me telling me to just let it go. My cousin called me one evening while I was still trying to figure out what to do. He said, "Just sign it over. There are people who buy old houses like that, even in that condition. You won't get much, but you'll get something." And I almost did it. I was this close to just signing the papers and walking away forever. But then something weird happened. I decided that before I made any decision, I was going to spend one night in the house. I don't know why. It just felt wrong to sell something my grandmother had spent her whole life in without at least spending one night there, like a goodbye of some kind. I brought a sleeping bag, some food, a flashlight, and my phone. The electricity didn't work, obviously, so I set up in the living room, which was the room in the least terrible condition, and I just sat there in the dark for a while, listening to the house breathe. And houses do breathe, by the way, old ones especially. They creak and shift and make sounds that have no obvious explanation. At some point, around midnight, I heard something above me, a slow, heavy dragging sound, like something being moved across the floor. Now, I'm not a person who believes in ghosts. I want to be clear about that. But alone in a dark, broken house in the countryside at midnight with something dragging itself across the ceiling above you, your brain starts going places it normally doesn't go. I almost left. I had my keys in my hand and everything. But I didn't leave. Instead, I picked up my flashlight and I started looking for the attic. I hadn't even thought about the attic before that moment. The house had a second floor, mostly just one long hallway with 3 doors that all led to empty bedrooms. But at the end of that hallway, there was a 4th door, smaller than the others, painted over so many times it was basically sealed shut. I had noticed it earlier in the day and assumed it was a closet. It wasn't a closet. Behind that door was a narrow staircase going up, steep, the kind where you have to turn your body slightly sideways just to fit. The wood groaned under every single step, like it was personally offended that I was walking on it. And at the top of those stairs was the attic. The dragging sound had stopped by now, which honestly was almost more unsettling than when it was happening. I pushed open the attic door and shone my flashlight inside. The first thing I saw were boxes, dozens of them, old cardboard boxes stacked against every wall, some of them collapsed under their own weight, some of them sealed with tape that had turned completely yellow. There was an old rocking chair in the corner, a broken mirror leaning against one of the sloped walls, a dress form, those mannequin torso things that people use for sewing, standing in the middle of the room like it was waiting for me. I remember thinking, okay, this is where the horror movie starts. But I kept going. I started looking through the boxes. Most of them were exactly what you'd expect. Old dishes wrapped in newspaper, clothes from decades ago, shoes that had completely dried out and cracked, books in terrible condition, pages stuck together, covers warped from moisture. And then I found the tin box.
It was small, about the size of a shoebox, but made of metal, the kind that used to hold cookies or biscuits. It was pushed to the very back of the shelf, behind a stack of old magazines, like someone had deliberately hidden it there. It had a little latch on the front, but no lock. I opened it. Inside were letters, a lot of them, tied together with a faded ribbon, and underneath the letters, a small notebook, and underneath the notebook, a photograph. The photograph was black and white. It showed a young woman standing in front of a house, the house I was standing in. She looked maybe 20 years old. She was smiling in a way that felt very real, not posed, the kind of smile you get when someone catches you off guard. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting I didn't recognize, it said, "The day everything started, 1963. I had never seen this woman before in my life. I took the tin box downstairs and spent the rest of the night reading those letters by flashlight, and what I found in those letters completely changed the way I understood my family, my grandmother, and myself. The letters were written by my grandmother, but they were written to someone I had never heard her mention, not once, not in my entire life. She had a sister. The letters spanned almost 30 years, from the early 1960s all the way to the late 1980s. They were addressed to a woman named Rosa, and from the very first letter, it was clear these two had been incredibly close. They wrote about everything, about their lives, their fears, the men they loved, the ones they lost. My grandmother wrote about my mother being born. She wrote about arguments and reconciliations and long silences. She wrote about the countryside house, this house, being the place where she felt most herself. And then, somewhere around 1987, the letters just stopped. No explanation, no final goodbye. They just ended. The notebook was my grandmother's diary. It only covered about 2 years, from 1985 to 1987, and in the last entry, she wrote something that I have read probably 50 times since that night. She wrote, "I don't know how to carry both of them at the same time, the love and the shame. Maybe one day someone will find this and understand. I hope they don't judge me. I hope they just understand." I had no idea what she was talking about, but I needed to find out. I spent the next 3 months trying to track down Rosa. That's a whole other story, and I'll probably tell it another time. But what I can tell you is that I found her. She was still alive. She was 81 years old and living about 4 hours away. She had never married. She had a small apartment full of plants and photographs. When I knocked on her door and told her who I was, she started crying before I even finished saying my grandmother's name. We talked for 6 hours that day. 6 hours. Rosa told me things about my grandmother that I never knew. She told me about the fight they had in 1987, something that sounds almost stupid from the outside, the way old family arguments often do, but that had split them apart completely. 2 stubborn women who both thought the other one would reach out first. And neither of them ever did. 30 years of silence because of one bad afternoon. My grandmother had kept every letter, had kept them hidden in that attic because she couldn't throw them away and couldn't bear to look at them. She held on to them for the rest of her life. Rosa had done the same thing with my grandmother's letters to her. They never spoke again. My grandmother died never knowing that Rosa had kept everything too. Sitting in Rosa's living room, looking at her face that looked just slightly like my grandmother's face, I understood what that diary entry meant, the love and the shame. She loved her sister too much to let go of the letters, and she was ashamed that she'd let too much time pass to ever fix it. I didn't sell the house. I know that probably sounds crazy, given everything I told you about the state it was in, but I couldn't do it, not after everything those walls had held. I'm fixing it slowly, room by room, at a pace I can actually afford. It's going to take years, probably. The kitchen floor still isn't done. The birds are still in the walls. I've made a kind of peace with them. But the attic is clean now. The boxes are gone, the broken mirror is gone, the dress form is gone. I kept the Tim box. It sits on a shelf in the living room where I can see it. Rosa has visited the house twice. The first time she walked in, she stood in the doorway of the living room for a really long time, without saying anything. Then she said, "She kept the curtains." I didn't know what that meant, but Rosa was smiling when she said it. That old house taught me something I think about all the time now. The things we can't throw away and can't look at, the things we hide in attics and push to the back of shelves, those things don't go away. They just wait. They wait for someone who's willing to climb a creaky staircase in the dark and actually look. My grandmother spent 30 years trying to carry both the love and the shame at the same time. She never got to put one of them down. I got to do it for her. And that was worth every cracked wall and collapsed ceiling and bird in the wall. Every single one.
If this story got to you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.